Alrighty, guys, welcome back today. This is going to be your World Prophecy Update. My name is Jericho. We are going to be discussing day 9 of the Israeli Gaza conflict, and we're going to be talking about a very crucial prophecy known as Jacob versus Esau. Okay, this is very, very prevalent to our time. Most people are not fully understanding what the Bible actually means when it says Jacob I loved and Esau I hated. Okay, we are seeing all of this play before our very eyes. It's all going to take place. So, before we begin tonight with our updates, when we talk about Iran and the new, talking about all these earthquakes and stuff that are coming in, I want us to look at Romans 9, okay, because this is going to kind of kick off this prophecy update. So, Romans 9:11, verse 13. Though they were not yet born, and had done nothing, either good or bad, in order that God's purpose of election might continue, not because of works, but because of him who calls. It is written that the older will serve the younger, and as it is written, Jacob I loved, but Esau I have hated. So we're going to be discussing what exactly does God mean when he says Esau I've hated, Jacob I loved, what's going on there. So I brought on my special friend tonight, Leroy. Welcome back to the stream, buddy. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Jericho. How's it going? How's everyone feeling today? How's my mic?
No, your mic's looking good. Your lighting's looking good. I know last time your lighting, we were having some issues with that, but you're looking quite spectacular, my friend.
Yeah, don't remind me. That's good.
Yeah. So we do have a lot to talk about today. Before we begin with the new updates coming out of Iran and kind of the reinforcements on the Gaza border that are taking place within Israel, what are your thoughts kind of moving into this next week? What do you think is going to take place with the Gaza invasion that is imminent?
I see, obviously Israel, they're definitely moving in militarily very hard, and they're definitely applying a lot of pressure on Hamas. We see Hamas, they're obviously moving like cowards right now at this point. They're pretty much hiding behind their civilians. We know that ultimately, what I believe is that they will surrender because of the artillery, like the way they're moving, even with their ground forces. It's not a joke, but I do anticipate some of these other regions, like we know that Iran is saying that they want to step into it. They said something about a big earthquake if Israel doesn't pull out of Gaza, which we don't see happening anytime soon. We know that Israel is definitely serious about this. And we know that Lebanon as well, there's been airstrikes from Lebanon also. So we're seeing involvement from other nations. So who knows what's going to come up next? Like, honestly, we can just anticipate what will come up next.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard being prophecy watchers in this day, and I'm sure our audience can totally understand this because we're kind of in limbo. You know what I mean? This conflict can go either which direction, right? The only thing we know 100% is that Israel is going to invade. Okay, there's no doubt to anybody who's doubting, saying this is just a bluff. It's not a bluff. They're going to invade. Currently, Hamas, they're bringing in bulldozers over, on the border of Israel, and they're going to move those bulldozers in because Hamas is planting landmines all along the border right inside of Gaza. So this invasion, they're currently, getting it ready to go. So we have yet to see what is exactly going to take place. But I want us to actually look directly what's happening today, Sunday, October 15th, within Israel. So I brought up this video. Let's go ahead and watch it.
Let's do it.
Yes, sir.
Can you tell us any more about the civilians? Because I'm hearing conflicting reports about whether they can get out, whether Hamas is blocking them from getting out, or whether the countries from which they're supposed to exit from are blocking that exit.
Yeah, so the Israelis have opened up 2 evacuation corridors in Gaza. Basically, when I say opened up, I mean they've agreed not to strike those corridors. And they're telling all civilians, not just in Gaza City, but in the entire northern part of the Gaza Strip, they must evacuate south. If they don't, they are at risk of being killed when the Israelis enter the Gaza Strip. And so we've seen the images, thousands of people heading south, trying to get out of the way toward the city of Han Yunis, the second largest city in Gaza, and even further south to the city of Rafah, near the Egyptian border. What is of note here, though, is Hamas. We had reporting that indicated Hamas was keeping people from leaving their houses before Israeli airstrikes. Well, the Israeli military now says Hamas is keeping people from driving south in some areas and even tried to set up roadblocks.
Not surprising.
All of this is a concern because you've got 2 million people inside Gaza. The vast majority are not militants. The death toll among civilians, women and children, is rising rapidly. And there are very concerning and real reports from inside Gaza of people running out of not just food, but also water. And so there's a humanitarian.
So actually, I do want to give this update. I was doing a lot of research into this before we go back to that. And actually, Gaza has a water desalination kind of plant that, goes on. So they're pumping water from the sea and taking it back. So this idea that they're actually running out of water is actually not true. Okay, at least as of now, they have plenty of water. The issue is that they don't have a major governing body like Hamas that actually cares for them. Right?
Yeah.
So it's like it's a complete travesty. And think about this. There's two main checkpoints within Israel. There's the one that goes into Israel from Gaza, and then there's the one that goes into Egypt. Now, Egypt has only allowed 2,000 refugees from Gaza per day in one of the most densely populated areas in the world, one of the greatest humanitarian crises in the world, 2 million people of population density. Only 2,000 are coming through a day. So I don't know what Egypt is thinking, man. I mean, honestly, it's a tragedy. Probably one of the reasons they're doing this, and I was researching this, brother, is that unfortunately many of the surrounding nations actually don't want Palestinians coming in. Yeah. Because they tried this with Jordan. Jordan tried to open up its borders and allow the Palestinians to come in. They tried to overthrow the kingdom of Jordan. So Jordan's King Abdullah was like, well, guess what? You're going to come in here and try to overthrow us, and we're going to push you back out. Egypt clearly doesn't want many different refugees. So unfortunately, that's just kind of the case. It's a terrible situation for those who are innocent, for the children and the women and stuff like that. But when there's no trust in the government, when the government are terrorists, not militants, as the New York Post wants us to say, but when they're terrorists, unfortunately, it's a hard situation for them. So, but let's kind of get back. I want us to look more on the border situation, so we can see what's going on down there, see how quickly they're advancing.
Soldiers are getting ready for a full-scale invasion of Gaza as airstrikes have continued throughout the night.
To implement a wide range of operational offensive plans, which can include combined and coordinated strikes from the air, sea, and land, end quote. Hamas is responsible for the killing of at least 1,300 Israelis and 29 U.S. citizens. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu assuring his troops that more fighting is on the way.
So Netanyahu's actually on the ground.
The next stage is
this
coming.
is him on the ground at the border, which is respectable.
Yeah, it's with them.
The New York Times reports that Israeli forces have delayed their initial plans as weather conditions in the area could worsen.
Meanwhile, a second U.S. aircraft carrier is on its way to the Mediterranean Sea in what Defense Secretary Lord Austin calls a show of force, as the U.S. continues to affirm its support for Israel.
Despite that, Iran is now warning Israel to stop the fighting immediately, saying any further action they take will cause a, quote, huge earthquake for Israel if their operations in Gaza continue.
Now, this is so funny because it's hilarious because Iran, I doubt, is going to do anything, okay?
No.
The reason why America is bringing these carriers out in order to kind of intimidate the region, we even saw this with Biden when he says any foreign government, entity, anybody who tries to take advantage of the situation, don't. Okay, that's basically the primary reason for the USS Ford coming into Bay. So if Iran, who is threatening if Israel's going to invade Gaza, they're going to join in, they're going to have a heavy price to pay, which is why I do not think anything is going to happen. I think if something were to, or if they were really considering it, it would have already been done. But unfortunately, I don't see anything happening. Do you see? I mean, what are your thoughts with Iran threatening Israel here?
I think what Iran is doing, they have their proxies around, which they're obviously working through. They're just giving threats out here at the moment because we know for a while Iran has been declaring to wipe out Israel as well. To directly assault Israel would be like they would have dire consequences. Do you know what I mean? And it will just escalate from there. So I think Iran, what they're doing is just working through their proxies, but wanting in direct involvement, I don't think they're going to ever do that. Even prophetically, we don't see Iran directly doing that. So yeah, I agree. I don't see Iran taking part or involving themselves into this situation. I don't see it.
Yeah. So again, guys, like we said, it's day 9. Okay, we're still very early into this conflict. We still have a lot to see, in terms of Bible prophecy, we're going to be talking about what we specifically think is going to take place. We've given many prophecies. We've released 2 videos, right? But we're going to be specifically focusing on the specific prophecies of Esau. Okay. The reason I brought Leroy, and I'm going to introduce one of my other brothers right now, is because Esau and the Edomites play a major role in everything that's going to take place in the last days. And the Bible gives us further insight into what's actually going to happen. So I've brought my brother Ashton Murray Ministries on with us tonight as well. So he's going to be discussing, helping us discuss the prophetic aspect of this. Ashton, how are you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. How are y'all doing today?
Yeah, doing well. How you
Living
doing?
the dream, man. Living the dream. And again, like I said, we need to have Leroy on this side because it's going to block my eyes with that banner right there.
Yeah, I don't mind being up here. It's all right. How's it
No,
going,
man.
Ashton? Good?
Yeah, it's going great. Going great. Just paying attention to what's actually happening in the world and making that, prophetic connection. Like I said before, it's kind of hard to do that when you're in the moment. We kind of have to look back and see what happened.
Mm.
Yeah. So Ashton, before we move forward with Jacob and Esau, what, having seen everything that's taking place so far, what are your thoughts? What do you think specifically is going to take place in the coming weeks? Specifically next week.
It's kind of difficult to say. I agree with y'all that I don't think Iran is going to do anything. I don't think any other Middle Eastern nation is actually going to do anything. They may work through their proxies, but I don't think they're going to have a direct involvement. Especially the United States sending out their naval ships and standing by Israel. I don't think they're going to be doing anything else.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it looks like we're pretty much all in agreement. We have yet to see, because the history of Iran is known for doing very stupid things. So
That is true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
denying
So
that.
they could just kind of take their horns and run in there and just kind of see what's going to take place. This could be the beginning of World War III. We don't know, right? One of the things
Right.
that's kind of scaring me too about this whole situation is the fact that we have basically 3 fronts going on right now from an American perspective. We have the Ukrainian Russian front. We've been reducing our weapons, ammunitions to them, but we're still funding that war, right?
Mhm.
There's this front, which is the Gaza-Israeli conflict, and then we have the Chinese-Taiwan front. So
Right.
we're operating 2 fronts right now. But if that Chinese-Taiwan front opens up, it's gonna be a freaking disaster scenario. So we could be seeing the beginning of something catastrophic on the world stage that would directly affect us. Oil prices, food
Yeah.
prices, all of it, guys. Like,
Mm.
Right.
what are your guys' thoughts? Do you think China's gonna use this situation for its own advantage?
Wow. Do you want to go, Ashton?
So from a political perspective and
Yeah.
being in the political world, if they don't do it, they're stupid. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
If they don't do it, they're stupid because this is their opportunity to do it. But here's the issue. The United States has a one China policy. So in reality, the United States officially recognizes Taiwan as a part of China. So to go against that is going against what the United States actually stands for. And we know that the president and many others have stated, we stand with Taiwan. But if they do, it's going to be catastrophic to the United States and our economy because that's where we get our computer chips, our cell phones. Those are the largest manufacturers right there in Taiwan.
Right.
But my main concern here in the United States is if you go back to World War II, China wasn't really involved in World War II other than Japan invading at the very beginning, but they were in a civil war. And I feel that there's a civil strife here in the United States that could eventually lead to that. I mean, if we look at Chicago and Los Angeles and New York, and we see the protesters chanting and celebrating what Hamas has done, we really can't live in a society together like that. And I've been seeing these tensions build for some time.
Yeah. And me and Leroy were even talking about, like, Leroy, I know you said there was a major Palestinian kind of conglomeration or however you want to call it, celebration in the UK. We've seen some in New York City. There's a glorification of what's taking place within Israel throughout the world because of the narrative that Palestine is somehow should be liberated, right? That Palestine should somehow be freed from the occupation, the great occupation from the Zionist invaders, from the great Satan, right? Within the and I was actually going to bring this on today, within the founding, like, think about it, within the Constitution, the founding documents of Hamas, they literally have the destruction of Israel within their document.
Yeah.
Like, imagine that. Like, the United States had the founding statement of the destruction of Mexico within its Constitution. That's what we are dealing with. Now, I think this is a perfect segue to get into this idea of the two brothers, the two covenants, and what God has prophesied about him hating Esau. Okay? Because we see this idea that God hates Esau, which we're going to translate into specific nations, and what that ultimately means. So I think we should move over to Genesis chapter 3. Leroy, why don't you go ahead and take this away, brother, because this is really your specialty right here. Cool. We're going to move into the very first prophecy that God ever gave, and it relates to all of this right now. So Leroy, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, sure. So again, couldn't have put it better. This is the first prophecy that God ever gave. Obviously in Genesis, he proclaims to the serpent, he tells the serpent this very thing. And this is going to shape the dynamic of how it ends as well. So it says in Genesis 3:15 specifically, if we go to 15, it says, I will put hostility, some versions say enmity, which is hatred, right, between you and the woman. And it says, between your offspring and her offspring, he will strike your head and you will strike his heel. So again, there's hostility. God's going to put enmity between the serpent and the woman. So the idea of who the woman is, a lot of people have sort of seen it as probably Mary, said that Mary is this great woman who brought forth the Messiah. But it's quite
the Catholic perspective.
That's the Catholic perspective, yeah. Which is a perspective I don't hold. I don't think any of you guys hold that either. But when you go to Revelation 12, which is here on the right side, here you have this great sign in heaven. It talks about a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet and a crown of 12 stars on her head. And it says she was pregnant. Now here you have the seed, because it says the seed of the woman will crush the head of the serpent. Now, Satan's not ignorant. Like, he understands this prophecy. He understands that something's going to come forth from a woman, and this woman, basically, he's going to have enmity with this woman, but the seed itself is going to crush his head. So Satan is very, like, he knows this. He knows this is about his destruction, basically. So in Revelation 12, you have this woman. She's clothed in the sun, moon under her feet, 12 stars above her head. If you are familiar with the story of Joseph, right, he has a dream, a similar dream, of the 12 stars and everything. It represents Israel, Jerusalem, Israel. So out of Israel, it says, verse 3, she was pregnant and cried out in labor and agony as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven. There was a great fiery red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on its heads were 7 crowns.
Very important. So, very important. Yeah.
That's very important, because the serpent in the garden wasn't described this way. Something has happened where he's received dominion and authority, because that's what the crowns represent, their diadem crowns. He receives this authority, and now he's described as this great dragon having 7 heads and 10 crowns, diadem crowns. So as we go on, if we go further down Revelation 12, we'll see where what this enmity is about. And we also need to remember, like, it's a red dragon. I think that's going to play into what's coming, what we're going to describe after in relation to Jacob and Esau. So we see here, it says,
is it verse 8 you're looking at?
Verse 8. Yeah, verse 8.
Yeah. So it says, but he could not prevail. That was the dragon, and there was no place for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was thrown out, the ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the one who deceives the whole world. He was thrown to the earth, and the angels with him. And so I know when we were talking, you wanted to skip down here.
Yeah,
verse 13, when it talks about the woman who's persecuted. So after this dragon is thrown down, it says, when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he persecuted the woman who had given birth to the male child. So there's a lot of specific things that he does, but we're going to move down to verse 17 where it says, so the dragon was furious with the woman and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring, those who keep the commands of God and hold firmly to the testimony about Jesus. Now, what's really frustrating about this is, again, a lot of people, when they look at Genesis 3, and I'm going to come back to Leroy, is they say, well, look, the seed of the woman who crushes the serpent, that's clearly the Messiah. That's Jesus. But when we look back at Genesis 3, it's not only talking about Jesus, it's saying your offspring will crush, or sorry, actually, let's look back specifically at the verse. He says, I will put hostility between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring. So what does that presuppose? That the devil has offspring,
Yeah.
and that the woman, Eve, has offspring. That's the idea, right? So it's not it's a dual prophecy about both the Messiah crushing the head of the serpent, but it's also the descendants of the woman crushing the descendants of the evil one, the children of the desolate ones, right?
That's right. Yeah, no, that's right. So yeah, when you look at the woman, and you know what, it brings to mind a verse that God declares the ending from the beginning. Because here you have the beginning of the book in Genesis 3, where God's proclaiming, about the seed of the woman, and then you have the end of the book, Revelation 12, which describes the same players. All right, the woman, you have the dragon, you have the seed, and then in Genesis you have the serpent, you have the woman Eve, and then it describes the offspring. But what I want us to focus on also is the enmity. God said He's going to put enmity, hatred between the woman and the and the serpent. So the serpent is going to hate the woman, and here you have in Revelation 12, it describes why he hates the woman, because the seed which she brought forth, which is the Messiah, who would come to crush the works of the enemy, which is what Jesus Himself said, I have come to put, to destroy the works of the enemy. He can't get to Christ, but he attacks the woman. He goes after Israel for a purpose. And what sort of resonates with me, or what kind of comes to mind, is the fact that Jesus said to Israel that until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, you will not see me again. And the enemy knows that. So in order to prevent Christ from coming back, he's going to attack the woman. He wants to put an end to the woman, which is why when they were established as a nation, they've always been getting attacked by the surrounding nation.
And that's exactly what he's doing right now. It's exactly what he's doing. This brings up a really interesting prophecy. This really should lead you guys to think, okay, so there's this enmity between the sons of Satan and the sons of the woman. So then who are the sons of Satan, right? Like that should lead you into kind of that question. And so we actually look at Numbers 24. We see another striking parallel with the prophecy of Balaam and Beor. So this prophetic seer, Balaam, right? He was the prophetic seer over the area of Moab, which is actually what is now the modern day Jordan. Okay, he was kind of this great prophetic, seer that everybody went to. The kings all around would go to him for wisdom. And so one specific king, Beor, actually goes to him and asks him to pronounce a curse on Israel, right? In the same way that many nations are trying to do that now. They're trying to curse Israel. They're trying to wipe it off the map. They want it gone. In the same scenario, this is what's happening with Beor. And so instead of actually pronouncing this judgment, Balaam actually pronounces a blessing and gives us further insight into what the Messiah and Israel is going to do in the last days. So it begins like this. The oracle of Balaam, the son of Beor, and the oracle of the man whose eye is opened. The oracle of him who hears the words of God, who knows the knowledge of the Most High, who sees the vision of the Almighty, falling down, yet having his eyes uncovered. This is where it begins. I see him now, but not yet. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come forth from Jacob. A scepter shall rise from Israel, and shall crush the forehead of Moab. So we see that right there. He's crushing the head of the serpent. He will crush the forehead of Moab and tear down all of the sons of Sheth. Edom shall be a possession. Seir, that's a mountain within Jordan, its enemies, also will be a possession. While Israel performs valiantly, one from Jacob shall have dominion and will destroy the remnant from the city. Guys, I mean, the Bible, when you read it from front to back, and sorry, I'm trying to get myself back up here, it opens up. So who are these descendants that the sons of Israel and ultimately the Messiah is going to destroy? The sons of Sheth, the foreheads of Moab, right? The mark on the forehead, we'll get into that. And the Edomites. Those are, that's kind of what it's talking about. So, Ashton, I know you're pretty well versed in the Edomites, in the Moabites. Do you kind of want to bring us into the beginning of all of this with Ishmael, with Esau, starting within Genesis 25?
Yeah. So Esau and Jacob, right? They were twins, and it was the younger would rule the older, right? And that's exactly what happens in the story. But let's just read. Reading it really gives you the understanding.
Right.
So
let's go
this
for it.
is Genesis chapter 25, and I do believe it begins in verse 29.
21. We
All
can start
right.
in 21 right here. So
Sure.
if we go to Genesis 25, 21.
Yep. So Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. The Lord was receptive to his prayer, and his wife Rebekah conceived. But the children inside her struggled with each other, and one said, and she said, "Why is this happening to me?" So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb. Two peoples will come from you and be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." So, I mean, that really that's like the whole, just like Leroy said, you want to know the end, go to the beginning, right? This is the beginning of it all. This is the separation, from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? This is where it splits off and goes into, they really are just cousins, right? And it talks about that even in Numbers as well. But if we continue reading, we find out that no, you're fine. In verse 30, he says, this is what it talks about here in verse 30. Let's see. He said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stuff because I'm exhausted." That is why he was also named Edom, because he's exhausted, he's famished, right? And that's just not physical, that's also spiritually. Spiritual Edom
Right.
is famished and exhausted.
Yeah. So, kind of going into this, we know that the descendants are, the descendants of God are a big deal. So you look at, it begins with Isaac and Ishmael. Okay. So there's the son that was born according to the flesh, right? Persecuting the son that was born according to the promise, right? Because Sarah was barren in her womb and she was waiting for the son. She had to wait through faith in order to wait for a son that God would come and do it. But in the meantime, they decided to take it in their own hands, and that's how Ishmael was born. Right. Now, when it comes to Jacob and Esau, right? Jacob is a Hebrew, and so is Esau. They're both Hebrews, right? Ishmael was not a Hebrew, so he was half Hebrew, half Egyptian. He became the father of the Ishmaelites. Esau, on the other hand, ended up marrying two Canaanite women, and he also married an Ishmaelite. Okay,
Right.
So Esau and Ishmael are interconnected in this way because they are essentially the father of these nations that are kind of half breeds, right?
Right.
Whereas the promised ones are full Hebrew, which is what God promised in the beginning. Now, I want us to look at a really interesting video. This is from a Jewish website that will kind of give you guys a better understanding, and then we'll give our commentary towards the end. Sorry, Leroy.
I don't know why you keep
Kind of
doing
put
it.
you out there, bro.
That's fine.
I keep doing that, bro. Yeah, let's get this up. So I want you guys to listen to this with us. We'll give our commentary so you can understand what we're saying.
Thing, especially about the Old Testament, it's that you always want to look closely when a blessing or a curse is pronounced. But now coming back to Genesis 28, verse 3, we see what happens to be, what appears to be the same blessing that God gave to Abraham and then Abraham gave to Isaac, now being transferred by Isaac to Jacob. But there's an important difference, where most Bibles say that Isaac said to Jacob something like, that you may become a company of people or a company of nations. The Hebrew for a company of people or company of nations is kahal amim. Kahal amim. This is entirely different than what God promised to Abraham and what was promised to Isaac. That is, that they would produce goyim, a mixture of nations. Because kahal amim, in its most literal translation, is used in Hebrew as the opposite of what God had told Abraham. Literally, kahal amim means a holy convocation or a holy assembly of fellow countrymen. In other words, it means an assembly of people for holy purposes, consisting of people, however, from the same tribe or the same group of tribes. That is, Jacob, who would soon be renamed to Israel, will be the first the first one in the line of the covenant promise who would produce as his offspring only Hebrews. He will produce only nations of Hebrew people, only people who would be called by the time of Moses his God's precious treasure.
So real quick, that's a really important distinction, because remember when Abraham had his first son, which is Ishmael, he's not a part of that line. Then you had Isaac. Then you have Esau, which is a part of the line, but then he intermarries with an Ishmaelite and with the Canaanites, thus perverting the line. After Jacob, there's only a progression of Hebrew descendants leading into the Messiah. That's the key distinction there. So I want you guys to center on that word goyim, surrounding kind of perverted peoples, right? Not perverted in like sexually perverted, but perverted in their descendant line, right?
Right.
Keep that in mind as we continue down this road.
I want to summarize that again so you get it. Abraham produced as children Hebrew and non-Hebrew offspring, just as God promised him in Genesis 12:2, with Isaac being the Hebrew. Abraham's son Isaac then went on to produce Hebrew and non-Hebrew children, with Jacob being the Hebrew. But Jacob now, he will produce only Hebrews, all the tribes of Israel, which is exactly what the blessing of a kahal amim, a holy convocation of fellow countrymen, that's what that's telling us. Well, moving on, beginning in verse 6. We are told that Esau observed that Isaac sent Jacob to Mesopotamia to get his wife, because his father detested Canaanite women. Poor Esau. He's already taken 2 Canaanite wives, which had greatly displeased his father, and now in a misguided, almost comical attempt to make amends, he goes to his father's brother's family, Esau's uncle Ishmael, the son that Abraham had sent away, and Esau takes now an Ishmaelite woman for a third wife. What a knucklehead. But as a matter of fact, as this event is told to us, its future effect is beyond calculation. Because here we have an alliance through
100%.
intermarriage formed. It bonds the two, think about this, the two dispossessed firstborns, rejected by Jehovah as the possible heirs to the covenant line of promise, Ishmael and Esau. It bonds them together into what will rather quickly turn into a permanent anti-Israel group of nations.
Yeah.
It is the alliance and gene pool mixing of Ishmael with Esau who forms the vast bulk of Islam in the world today.
Yep.
And the entire bulk of Arabs. This report of such few words in verse 9 radically altered the course of history.
It's so clear when you see that. So when you guys hear that, obviously you guys know this, but what are your thoughts? We'll move into Galatians 4 further on down this road, but I want to get your guys' thoughts.
You know what comes to me? It's like beyond what we're seeing in the news outlets and everything, there's a deeper spiritual aspect to it, right? So what we have to do as Christians is see what's going on a deeper spiritual level. It's not about land. It's not about making peace with Israel. What they want to do is ultimately destroy Israel, just completely take it off the map. And some people don't understand why. Some people are trying to find or get a reason behind it. And as we move on to Galatians 4, I believe it's going to highlight where the deep root issue is. So I want people to actually realize what the war is. It's a more spiritual war, and it stems from what happened surrounding, Jacob, Esau, Ishmael. And even before that, even Genesis 3:15, which declares the enmity, and then up until our day now. So yeah, that's all I have to say to it.
Right.
So Ashton, how does that relate specifically to Esau selling his birthright?
Well, it's again, I agree with Leroy. It's very spiritual, right? This is all spiritual. And this is they believe that they're the heirs not just to the land of Israel, but also to the covenant, right? Not- that's what they believe, and that's what they are taught from a young age, that this all belongs to them, that everything is theirs because we're descendants of Abraham. And they're descendants of Abraham, but they're not descendants of Isaac and Jacob, which is what's important and
Yeah.
what he talked about, right? So the word goy in Hebrew literally just means Gentile, right? And I can never pronounce the other one. It's like goy
Goyim.
what
The Goyim.
goyim. Yeah, goyim
Goyim.
just means nations of Gentiles. That's what it
Yeah.
means. So technically we're goyim. We're non-Jewish, and we're a non-Jewish
Yeah.
nation. And
Yeah.
it's funny because all of those nations, like he said, they're all Islamic. They all hate Israel. And most of these people who are in like Iran and Iraq and Jordan and Lebanon, they don't necessarily care to occupy Israel. They just don't want it to be Jewish.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, it's hard because, they are the firstborn. I mean, Ishmael is the firstborn, the father of the
Right.
Arabs, the Edomites, which are the Jordanians, some of the Palestinians, even those in Lebanon. They are the firstborn, the one that should have received the promise. But God, throughout history, has been showing us why they are not allowed that inheritance and how that's going to translate into the last day. So I want this to move back to this idea of the sons of the desolate ones and of essentially Satan's line. Because we know that the dragon is going to persecute the woman in the last days. He's going to use this or do this by pouring out nations, languages, tongues, Gentiles towards the woman to try to devour her in the last days. He's got 7 heads, 10 horns, 10 diadems on his horns, and he gives his authority to this beast that rises out of the sea. Okay?
Right.
Now, when we look at, I want us to go into Galatians chapter 4, because this will actually give us more information as to the spiritual nature of all of this and what's going to take place. So, Leroy, do you want to kind of give us Galatians chapter 4, of the
sure.
exegesis?
Yeah, sure. And as you were mentioning that, I was just gonna highlight the fact that this idea of red is throughout what we've been discussing so far. Esau, he was reddish. This red stew that he received,
Right.
and you have the dragon who's also described as red. The scarlet beast obviously is red also. This idea of red stems from that sort of hatred, towards Jacob, the brother, persecution towards Israel. So I just wanted to highlight that real quick. So where do you want me to read, brother? Let's see.
Yeah, so when we look at Galatians 4, Paul is giving us an allegory of the women. Within Galatians 4, we have these 2 women, right? One of them has a specific quality, the other one has another specific quality. One of the women is barren, and the other woman is not.
Yeah.
One has more children, the other does not. One's children are called the children of the desolate ones, and the other is not. So when we look at 21, he's talking to a Gentile audience here. He's saying, or actually, he's talking to the Christians and the Jews who are trying to be under the law. So Paul says, "Tell me, you who want to be under law, do you not listen to the law? For it is written that Abraham had 2 sons, one by the bondwoman and one by the free woman." So the first one, that's Ishmael. The free woman, that's Isaac. Okay. But the son of the bondwoman was born according to the flesh, and the son of the free woman through the promise. And he literally says right here, this is allegorically speaking, for these women are 2 covenants, one proceeding from Mount Sinai, that's in Arabia, bearing children who are to be slaves. She is Hagar. Now, this Hagar is Mount Sinai in Arabia and corresponds to the present Jerusalem, for she is in slavery with her children. But the Jerusalem above is free. She is our mother. Do you want to exegete that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, Paul, he's always been hitting on this point here, the idea of the flesh and the spirit, and how they're opposing each other, how they're divided, how the flesh wants to do one thing and the spirit wants to do another. And this resonates with ourselves because We understand the idea of the war between the members. However, in this instance, it's been described as two covenants. You have the covenant that's, that represents freedom in Jerusalem, and that's Sarah and Isaac. The whole idea of, of being free in Jerusalem, that's what it represents. And you also have the bondage aspect, which is represented through Hagar and Ishmael, and it's given two locations. You have Jerusalem, and then you have Arabia. Now, Jerusalem represents free, and then Arabia represents bondage, being in spiritual bondage. And he's saying these two represents two covenants, right? So, I don't know if Ashton, you want to jump in as well. If it's,
So, I mean, it says in verse 24, this is allegorically speaking, right? And this is with Bible prophecy, we have everything, people will tell you all sorts of stuff, right? Usually in the Greco-Western Roman style, they'll take what's literal and make it allegorical, and what's allegorical, they'll take it literal. Well, this blatantly says this is allegorically speaking, right? So it's not that people of, the descendants of Hagar and Ishmael can't be saved, but it's that part of the world, just like, they just have that other covenant that they want to be with, right? And not the true covenant. Just like my brother-in-law, he's Palestinian, right? But he is a born again, Jesus believing, Bible thumping Christian. And it's because he was saved through faith, right? And just like Abraham was saved through faith, any of these people can be saved through faith. Now their lineage may be, coming from the bondwoman, but they are most welcome to come in and be a part of the free woman.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially, the book of Romans 8, Romans 9 is talking about the ingrafting of those who are, he says not everybody who was born of Abraham are Abraham's children. Right? We literally got to take that verse and go put it on like all the bumper cars in Islam or all the cars, so that they understand that just because you're a child of Abraham through a specific lineage does not mean you're actually Abraham's descendants. What does he say within Romans? It is though Abraham was an example, because it says that he believed God and it was credited to him as righteousness. So what allowed him to be righteous before God was not works, his works of the law, him being a very good man. He didn't. It was, Abraham was like selling his women or his wife, or not selling. Sorry, that's kind of a big word, but he was essentially, he was
being a coward
to tell the king. Right. He was being a coward. He was scared to tell the kings of Egypt and all these other places that his wife was his wife. So he called her his sister. But anyway, the fact of the matter is that Abraham was sinful, and the fact that he believed God was able to save him, that's what credited to him as righteousness. So
of course,
anybody who was a descendant of Abraham moving forward from that is from faith. All of us are grafted in through our faith in Jesus Christ. Now, when it says that the woman who, there's two women in Revelation 12, there's two women within Galatians 4. There's a woman that's in Mount Sinai that's bearing children for slavery because they desire to be under the law. They correspond to present-day Jerusalem. So all you have to do is read it and say, look, there's Arabia and there's Jerusalem, and they correspond. How do they correspond? Well, it's because you have two religious systems, Islam and Judaism, that claim to be descendants of Abraham, that are trying to bind themselves under a law. They're trying to become righteous before God under the law. Now it says there's a mystery here that the flesh, that's the flesh, works, will persecute those who are of the Spirit. When you understand this mystery, you understand the end times. Because what does it say within Galatians chapter 4? When we go back and look at the prophecy given, he says, rejoice, O barren woman who does not bear. Who's he talking about? Who are the barren women we're supposed to understand? Sarah was barren. So was Rebecca, right? And so was many of the other, basically you could say Mary was pretty much barren, but the Holy Spirit allowed for her to bear a son, right? So the barren woman is a representation of those who are putting their faith in God. God will provide the son. That's the idea. It says, rejoice, barren woman who does not bear. Break forth and shout, for you who are not in labor. More numerous are the children of the desolate than the one who has a husband. That's the key. More numerous. So bringing this back to everything we've established. The descendants of the evil one, the serpent, are going to try to strike the heel of the descendants of the woman Eve, right? The Messiah will crush the head of the serpent in response. Okay, the children of the desolate ones will be more numerous than those who actually have a husband, a spiritual husband, that is Christ. Does that make sense?
Makes so much sense. Yeah.
It does.
I mean,
It all boils down. It all comes down to one thing. It's all interconnected and woven together, you know.
Exactly.
And so ultimately, to bring that point home, and we're going to finish off with a couple prophecies within Amos, within some of the others, but what this ultimately means to everybody watching is, you know, the Antichrist, the beast, all, you know, the 7 heads, the 10 horns, everything we see within the book of Daniel, what it's trying to relay to us is this spiritual battle that's been going on from the beginning of time. And that's ultimately gonna, you know, a lot of, you know, Christians in the modern day, and I'm sure you guys have dealt with this, I'm sure my audience has dealt with this, is gonna say that, you know, these Antichrist nations and this Antichrist spirit is somehow separate from the Middle East, is somehow separate from Abraham, right? But what we're saying is no, those desolate children, the 4 heads of Sheth, the 4 heads of Moab that, you know, the Messiah is going to crush, are descendants of Abraham, right? So
Right.
the whole picture of, you know, Revelation in the last days is a family issue. It's in-house. It's Abrahamic, right? That's why
Right.
we're dealing with these Abrahamic accords. That's why we're trying to find peace in the Middle East, right? So do you guys want to elaborate on that a little bit more?
I was going to say that you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a family issue. Ultimately, we know that biblically, Christ will rule all nations from Jerusalem, and that's the whole idea in the New Testament. Is when Christ came, and even when he was near Jerusalem, the disciples would say, "Will you now bring the kingdom? Like, will the kingdom now come now at this point in time?"
Yeah.
And obviously, at that time, it wasn't the time because Israel was not prepared. They were not ready in season just yet. But we know that Jerusalem is also the heart of the issue too. We know that Jerusalem is the focal point. So when we do see, you know, like for instance, Zechariah 12, Zechariah 14, God brings the nations against Jerusalem, but he says all who like to step on it would, what's the word again? They would injure themselves, right? That's the issue at hand. That's the issue at play, because the enemy knows that Jesus has come to rule from Jerusalem. He wants to set the nations around Jerusalem in order to, you know, make it a ruin, completely destroy Israel, so that, you know, these things can't come into fruition. When you read Micah
And
5,
one of the things, sorry, brother, one of the things before I bring Ashton on, I keep coming back to Joel chapter 3. I think this is really relevant to our discussion. Because, you know, we brought this up in a previous live stream, but I want the audience to kind of see this too.
Yeah.
When you look at Joel chapter 3, it makes total sense what's going on. You know, he says, I will gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. That's the valley of Jezreel, right, in northern kind of central Israel. I will enter into judgment with them there on behalf of my people and my inheritance Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and have divided up my land. They have cast lots for my people, traded a boy for a harlot, that's a prostitute, and sold a girl for wine that they may drink.
Yep.
Moreover, what are you to me, O Tyre, Sidon, and all the regions of Philistia? So that's, he's saying, what are you to me, O Lebanon, right? Sidon and all the regions of Palestine, Philistia, Palestine. Are you paying me back for something? But if you've paid me back swiftly and speedily, I will return your own payback on your own head. Since you have taken my silver and my gold, brought my precious treasures to your temple, and sold the sons of Judah and Jerusalem to the Greeks, in order to remove them far from the territory. Behold, I am going to arouse them for the place where they have sold them, and return your recompense on your own head. Okay? So he talks about right here, the day of the Lord is coming, dark is that day, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of the Lord is near, in the valley of decision. Okay? He says, Egypt will become a waste, okay? And Edom, Esau, will become a desolate wilderness because of the violence done to the sons of Judah, in whose land they have shed innocent blood. But Judah will be inhabited forever, and Jerusalem for all generations. I will avenge their blood which I have not avenged, for the Lord dwells in Zion.
Yep.
He dwelt
And-
in Zion.
And that right there, you know, I was having conversation with some Christians who think that, you know, the 1,000-year reign is, you know, allegorical or, you know, other things. But you really read Joel chapter 3 and it says, you know, for I am the Holy One. And most people will tell you of Israel, of Israel. Well, in that verse, it says, I am the Holy One in Israel.
Mm.
In
Christ will literally physically dwell in the city of
Yeah.
Jerusalem,
Mhm.
and he will rule and teach all the nations how to govern.
Amen.
Exactly.
Yeah, amen.
What are your thoughts, Leroy? We're gonna move. I'm gonna get Leroy's thoughts. We're gonna move into the question and answer period. Okay, so
Okay.
Everybody who has a question, we got a lot of comments. Sorry, guys. I wish I could read and speak at the same time. I can't see most of them. So go ahead and put your question down below for us. Okay. Make sure to put a Q in front of your question so that we know it's a question. And I'm gonna start saving those. Okay. While you guys are bringing those in, I want to thank you guys for being a part of the stream. We got 300 people in here. We love each and every one of you. Okay. So, you know, as we're getting those in, and here, let me pop this up. You know, there's this really strange dichotomy within Numbers 24 and Psalm 2 that I wanted to discuss with you guys. Okay. So remember within Numbers 24, and I want to get you guys' opinions on this. It says that a star will come out of Jacob and a scepter will rise. Or actually, let me get the correct verse up here. So we're going to move back to Numbers. Sorry, y'all. I should have had this up.
No, you're good.
That's why I said I need somebody to get in here and freaking. Let me see here if I can. Anyway, maybe we'll scrap it. What are your guys' thoughts? Do you have anything to add before we move into the questions?
Do I have anything to add? I think we've covered a lot. Let's get into these verses that you were talking about, and let's
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, you had a verse you wanted to bring up earlier, wasn't it? Amos chapter 1, verses 6 through 7, Ashton. I know that was really powerful. Let me get that up right here.
Yes.
So if we look right here, this is really pertinent to what we're dealing with. Do you want to go ahead and read?
Sure.
Yeah.
So starting in verse 6.
It should be all the yellow. Yeah.
Okay. Thus says the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Gaza, and for 4, I will not revoke its punishment, because they departed an entire population to deliver it up to Edom. So I will send fire upon the wall of Gaza, and it will consume her citadels. I will also cut off the inhabitant from Ashdod, and him who holds the scepter from Ashkelon. I will even unleash my power upon Ekron, and the remnant of the Philistines will perish, says the Lord God. Did you want me to continue?
If you want, it's up to you.
Sure, we'll finish one more verse. Thus says the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Tyre, and for 4, I will not revoke its punishment, because they delivered up an entire population to Edom, and did not remember the covenant of brotherhood. So just those, so Amos 1 and even Amos 2, it's talking about the nations that God is going to punish and why, and why he will not revoke the punishment. You know, just like we read earlier, you know, you've given me recompense. Why? Now I'm going to give you recompense. And God's not taking that back. He's going all out here.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, when they invade Israel, his prized possession, it's literally called the apple of his eye. They're going against him. Right?
Yeah.
They're going against him. And, you know, these are the warnings that Jesus gave. He said, look, you know, these people, they're going to pull you out of the synagogues and they're going to put you to death thinking that they are serving me. But they do this because they do not know the Father or the Son. Right? That's the idea is they don't know God. They don't know the true God. And to finish this up before we move into questions, I did get Numbers 24 up, luckily, while you were reading. So remember, there's this dichotomy of, you know, I see him now, but not yet, right? He's coming out of, you know, I see somebody coming out of Israel. He says, a star shall come forth from Jacob, and a scepter shall rise from Israel. He's going to crush the forehead of Moab and tear down all the sons of Sheth. Okay, now, here's what's interesting is, you know, Balaam was giving this prophecy to an Assyrian king. So it was to Beor, one of the Assyrian kings, right? To an Assyrian king, and when you look at their, you know, their paintings and their portraits, they would have understood directly what a scepter meant and a star meant. So
Yes.
when you look at Assyrian paintings, their kings would hold these
Yeah,
scepters,
so, yeah.
riding their chariots. That would have
Mm.
essentially been a statement of kingship,
Rulership,
of
kingship,
rulership.
yeah.
So obviously, a king is going to rise out of Israel. That's what he would have understood. But when he says a star, that's an interesting word, because a star to an Assyrian only meant one thing. It meant a god, right?
Right.
So when he says a star will rise out of Israel and a scepter shall rise from Jacob, what would the Assyrian king have understood? He says a god will rise out of Israel and a king shall rise out of Jacob. That's what he meant. So
Right.
within some of the foundational prophecies in the beginning of time, we saw the divine Messiah coming out of Israel to save his people and to destroy these nations that come against her in the last days. So
Right.
before we move into the question and answer, I want you guys to understand this is all in the plan. Okay? Everything that's going to happen is real. It's all in the plan. Okay? So
Right,
just
yeah.
keep that in mind.
Yeah.
100%.
All right, boys. So let's get some of these questions in here. We actually got a bunch today, so this is looking really good.
Good.
So let's get into it, guys. The first question we have, and again, like I said, feel free to just jump in here. Jesus is King says, do you think the false prophet will actually pretend to be Jesus Christ?
That's a great question, because you can interpret it in so many different ways. But I don't think that the false prophet per se will proclaim or pretend to be Jesus. Oh, that's so hard. Leroy, help me out here with that one. You're more on the false prophet, but the false prophet is said at the very end to be thrown into the lake of fire, right?
fire,
There's hell, and then there's the lake
Yeah.
of fire, right?
Yeah.
So the false prophet. So it's really like, who is this false prophet, and
Yeah.
what does he do? That's a hard one. I don't think that he will. I do believe that would be more so the Antichrist. What are y'all thoughts?
Yeah, I believe that obviously when we read Revelation, we see two lambs presented. We see a lamb that was slain, and we also see this dragon-like lamb it speaks like a dragon, but it's represented as a lamb, right?
Yeah.
So straight away we
Yeah.
see like just two ideas, two lambs. One speaks like a dragon, and we also have that Christ speaking about when you see him in the desert, someone who's imitating him. When you see him in the
Yeah.
desert, don't go there. If you see him in the chambers, don't listen, because there's
Yeah.
going to be someone who's going to proclaim to be Christ. There's going to be a false Christ figure above the false Christ figures that we see right now, who's going to
Yeah.
literally be so convincing that Jesus, he's mentioning him that, don't go to the desert if you see him in the desert. So I believe that this false prophet would imitate Christ in terms of miracles, because it's by the miracles that people even take the mark of the beast on their foreheads. If you read Revelation 19 towards the end, because they were deceived by these miracles that the false prophet is working. So he's going to imitate Christ to an extent and do all these wonderful miracles, to lure people into the lie. So I believe that there's going to be, an aspect of him that's going to, pretend to be or claim to be Christ. So I really do believe that he will.
I think that's good. I think for me, a lot of people get confused, when they talk about the false prophet and the Antichrist, because a lot of people already have an ingrained view of what they're going to be. When you think of Antichrist, so people will think the Antichrist is the false Jesus, right? When people think false prophet, they usually don't think false Jesus with the false prophet. They think he's, some sort of prophet that's going to aid the Antichrist false Jesus in the last days. I think that's what most people get. But, when we look at the descriptions of the false prophet and the Antichrist, we actually see the exact opposite. With the Antichrist, he's this typology of this great northern Gentile king who's going to gather the nations together, and he's going to invade Jerusalem, and he's going to set up and proclaim himself to be God. So I mean, there's elements there where you could say this guy could be a false Jesus, but there's not many. However, when you look at the false prophet, the only descriptors of the false prophet are Jesus. Like, within Revelation, we have 3 mentions of a lamb. One of them is you have this lamb that was slain. It had 7 horns. It had eyes and stuff like that. That's clearly a representation of Christ when he was slain and his all-seeing nature. Then you have this false prophet, this second beast that rises up out of the earth. It's got 2 horns like a lamb, and it speaks like a dragon. So
Right.
already within the main descriptor of this man, this false prophet who's going to aid the Antichrist, he is described as a false Jesus that speaks as if he were Satan, right?
Right.
So I think that there's only one way to look at the false prophet, and it's the fact that he is this pretending Jesus Christ, right? And I think when you look at it from the Islamic perspective, it makes perfect sense.
Fits, yeah.
Okay. So let's move on. Hopefully that answered your question, brother. Emmanuel Peter, this is a quickie. What prophecies did Israel fulfill? Check out
Too
Micah
many.
5:5.
Too many.
Check out Ezekiel 38. Check out it's all over the Bible.
Amos
So,
9:15.
Yeah.
There's a bunch
Yeah.
of them. Israel has, I mean, from the beginning. I mean, literally the beginning to the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. You really can't miss it. I mean, it's hilarious. Who are the Jews called the synagogue of Satan in Revelation 3:9 and 2:9?
We had that discussion, Jericho, not too long ago.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot
What are your
of
thoughts?
yeah, I mean, so for a while I was thinking like, oh, well, it's the, you know, the Muslim people who claim to be the chosen people and that, you know, they're of the synagogue of Satan. But I'm not entirely sure now because I believe that Revelation, you know, talking about the churches is a timeline of the church ages, right? So I'm not entirely sure what that verse means. It very well could mean that. But again, it might not. So that's kind of one of those things where I'm going to have to do more research to find out on my own of what I believe, because I previously did strongly hold that belief that it was, you know, Islam claiming to be the chosen people, but I'm not entirely sure. I kind of want to hear Leroy's thoughts on this matter.
Oh yeah, my thoughts on it. I believe somewhere in the New Testament, you know when Jesus would point out to the Pharisees, even though they were inherently Jews, but say you are of your father, the devil, Satan.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily believe that those who say they're Jew are automatically the synagogue of Satan, which is what some groups of people think. I think there's people that imitate and say they're Jew, but inwardly, obviously, they are so against Christ. They have that Pharisee spirit, and everything they do, their actions, the way they are, emanate what Satan is about. So I believe it's just going back to that time of that Pharisee kind of spirit,
Legalistic.
exactly, legalistic, very about the law, but against the gospels, against what Christ, So that's what I believe. But I don't know. What's your thoughts?
Yeah,
Jared?
I mean, I think that's really good. I think you guys really answered it. This question actually kind of came to my attention. He says, I understand how Ishmael is not Hebrew and Isaac is due to Abraham having different wives. How is Jacob only Hebrew and Esau is not? Since isn't Isaac the Hebrew he married and Rebekah Hebrew as well? So I think there was a misunderstanding there. So Esau and Jacob are both Hebrew, right? Because they're of the same mother, Rebekah. But the issue is that Esau, his descendants, the Edomites, are born from Canaanite, intermarriage. Canaanite alliance, intermarriage, also Ishmaelite. So so Esau's line is corrupted according to Genesis, right? Not according to us, just Genesis. That's just how it is.
Well, he did it to himself.
Yeah,
he did it to himself. He sold his birthright. He literally, gave it up for a bowl of porridge, and he got angry at his brother. So he's like, "Screw it! I'm just gonna go get with my uncle's wife. Screw you guys." And you could see that familial, just like, just like hate. Like, when you go to a dinner party and it's just like you could feel the tension in the air. Like, that's exactly probably what it was like during that time. And so, I definitely don't believe that Esau is not a Hebrew. He was.
Most certainly.
So Jacob, only, up until the time of the Messiah, there was pure blood Hebrew intermarriages, right?
Yeah.
If you want to know more about that, look at the genealogies within Matthew and within Luke. You'll see it's all Hebrew from that point on. Okay.
Right.
That's great. Yeah.
Oh, bro.
Oh no.
No. Should we even entertain this, bro? This guy's probably a Hebrew Israelite.
Well, kind of.
Bro, if you say
I've heard one of their no. What I'm saying is they confuse this one verse, right, where they say that they have black on their face, right, and it's like, well, if you go back to the real Hebrew, what did they do, right? They were lamenting and they threw ash on their face, right, and it turned their skin black because they were throwing ash on their face and lamenting. That is something that they used to do. There's no DNA or connection to Africa being Israel. There's just not, right. And just like there are
Yeah.
people who are like white who are like, oh, it's these white people. No,
Mhm.
they're in the Middle East. They're Middle Eastern men. That's what they
Yeah.
are.
Yeah,
It's
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I don't even entertain it. It's just so far off.
It
Like,
is. It is.
prophetically as well. It's just nah.
Yeah. Thank God, man. I've had some conversations with some Hebrew Israelites, and my brain just dies every time, man. I'm sorry.
Every time.
Yeah.
So
And
here's a
to
good
me,
one.
it's not
Oh,
important.
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was
Yeah,
just saying. To
yeah,
me,
yeah.
it's not important. Like what's important is that we're now right here. All three of us are the seed of Abraham because of our faith in Christ.
Because
So it
of
doesn't
faith
even
in
matter.
Christ.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
This, this is a good one. He says the term, I don't know what he's talking about, is dispensationalism. It was invented in the 1800s by Christian Zionists. The New Covenant theology was the prevailing view and makes more sense. Do you guys know what he's referring to here?
No, I feel like he left out an important part.
Yeah, maybe comment down below again, because this idea of dispensationalism, and there's a lot of hate for it, is really interesting, because it's essentially the idea that God deals in dispensations. So he deals with in different time periods to different people in different ways. He doesn't change, but he deals in different ways. So to those who are against dispensationalism, I'm who cares about the term? God opened up the new covenant. That's a new dispensation. Right? So I guess I just don't understand how. And then again, this person says it was invented by Christian Zionists, as if to say these Christians. It's like, again, the Lord is going to dwell in Zion. So am I a Christian Zionist for thinking that? Maybe, but Zionism is it's a hill in Jerusalem that the Lord is going to come back and save and rule from. So I don't know how you could not be a Christian Zionist, right?
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of
So
these terms, a lot of people will use and reverberate,
So I googled what dispensationalism is just to kind of get like a real definition. Dispensationalists use a literal interpretation of the Bible and believe that the divine revelation unfolds throughout the Bible. They believe that there is a distinction between Israel and the church, and that Christians are not bound by Mosaic law.
Okay.
It's very interesting, but I don't think I hold that view, because I don't really think there is a distinction between Israel and the church, but there's also not, because it doesn't matter what race you are, what background you come from. If you have faith in Christ, you have faith in Christ, right? And that we are not bound by the Mosaic law. Like, yes, we are, but no, we're not. We're bound by the spirit of the law, not by the letter of the law anymore. So I don't know. That's kind of something I'm going to have to read a lot about and talk a lot about to really get an understanding.
Got you.
All right, guys. So we're gonna do. Thanks for being in here, guys. This is a big session today. We have almost 400 people in here. We're gonna do 3 more questions. So we're gonna be looking, scouting, get as many questions as we can, and then we are out. So you guys feeling good so far?
I'm feeling great.
Yeah, I'm glad we did it a bit earlier. I'm not feeling tired.
You always get so tired in these streams, bro.
Yeah, it's a good time.
We need to make Leroy.
So if you got questions, go ahead and put them down below, guys. This one is interesting right here, and actually, this guy's saying, okay, so right here, okay, do you believe it will be exciting and scary at the same time when Jesus returns to rapture us? Will we see him furious in a bloody-looking red robe, all flamed up with fire eyes, roaring loud?
There's a verse. Sorry.
You go ahead.
There's a verse that talks about how you shouldn't actually want the day of the Lord because of how dark, gloomy, and terrifying that it is. So it's like, yes, I'm excited because I want to be with my king, but that day is gonna be wild, and it's not a day that we can literally prepare for.
Yeah, it's the darkest time. Like, think of all of history, like everything, and this one point, and the darkest point of humanity is going to occur before this birth, this birth of the sons of God, where we're all going to take on glorified bodies, and be with our Lord and Savior. Me and Jericho were actually talking about this, the return of Christ, right? Because we see him return on the clouds, right, on his throne, and at that point, which I believe in Revelation 6, that's the point the rapture comes in, where he You know, when he appears, when the sky, opens up and he appears, we're all caught up with him. The idea of him when he comes and his robes are all dipped in blood, he's already fought a battle in Edom, according to Isaiah 63. You know, it says, "Who is this who comes from Edom with his garments stained in crimson?" And then he comes riding on a horse. So he comes on a throne during the rapture period when he comes out from the sky and every eye will see him. But he also has, when he comes on a horse and his whole robes are dipped in blood, it's like two separate events. That's a whole different.
Yeah, I mean, no, that's really good. It's what's crazy about Christ's return is I think a lot of Christians, in the same way with Israel and in the same way with all these prophecies, don't really understand what's truly going to take place. There's a lot of prophecies within Isaiah, of this divine king coming from the south. He's going to emerge from Egypt and he's going to come from the south. He's going to, within Isaiah, he's going to take his staff and put it over the sea, and the sea is going to turn into 7 straits, and his people is gonna run through it. So one of the things I've been dealing with listening to Joel Richardson, and I he came out with a book called Mount Sinai to Zion, and it's this idea of the second Exodus, how Jesus is actually going to return in the south somewhere, whether that's in the Wadi or whether that's in Egypt, somewhere in these regions, and he's actually going to recreate the Exodus like Moses did, because Jesus is ultimately the greater Moses. He's the greater Joshua, right? And so a lot of people will look at Zechariah 12 and say, well, look, he's going to step foot on the Mount of Olives, or he's going to land on the Mount of Olives, but it doesn't say land. It says he's going to, on that day, stand on the Mount of Olives. So I think there's much more of a progression where he's going to go through Jordan. We're going to see him all bloody, and he's going to be, no one was with me, right? I was trampling the nations in my rage and my wrath alone. But then he comes up into Jerusalem and ends up at the Battle of Armageddon. Right. So there's a lot more to the return of Christ than people give it credit for, I think.
Absolutely. A good one is Isaiah 19, verse 1. It said, "Behold, the Lord rides upon a swift cloud into Egypt."
Into Egypt. Yeah. And it's in context of the last days, because it's in judgment of the Assyrian, right? So there's a lot more to it, guys. There's a lot more to it. 2 more questions, guys. Do you have any questions? Go ahead and put them down below. Okay, I'm going to look at these questions and see if there's anything good. This one's good. This is going to be in reference to Daniel chapter 11 and Daniel 8. So this guy says, I think this war will end with Iran and its proxies decimating the king of Yavan, which will arise as the Antichrist from Turkey and Kurdistan after the 10 nations get together. Thoughts?
Okay, that's an interesting view. Whether, obviously, the book of Daniel and Jericho, it's a very, very you gotta be careful with the book of Daniel, because again, from my understanding is, I believe that Iran and Yavan, that region of Iran, will kickstart everything when the ram goes against the goat. But we have our own kind of views on that. But it's a possibility. The 10 nations, I'm trying to understand where you get that from. Are you referencing the 10 kings?
Probably the 10 kings.
The 10 kings. Well, the 10 kings come from one nation. And that same nation is where the little horn, the Antichrist, arises from.
Right.
That's what I would say to that. It could be a possibility. It could reshape the whole Middle East. It could kickstart Daniel 8 and everything, which I believe is the precursor to all this. So that's my thoughts on that.
I think we all have a different we all differ in Daniel. Each one of us, Leroy, Jericho, and I, we all differ in what Daniel means and says. I think we have a collective idea and belief system. But it's kind of difficult, because you got to go to the Psalms 83 war, right? Where it talks about how they will be a confederacy against Israel, right? I think that's what those 10 kings are. And with Leroy here, I think it's going to be a one united thing, kind of like a new Ottoman Empire type deal. The 10 kings united to go against Israel.
Well, the question within Daniel 11, and this is to really answer his question, is who, those 4 horns that arise from the goat, which is Yavan, Greece, the king of Greece, believing that's a future event. where does the little horn exactly rise? Because if you believe, and this is like a really heavy study, so a lot of people, they won't get this, but to the guy, hopefully he has some understanding. Me and Leroy are currently at conjecture, or butting heads, because we're not sure whether the goat is the same as the leopard. So within Daniel 7, you have the third beast, which is the leopard. It has 4 wings. It's got 4 heads. Within Daniel 8, you got the ram and the goat has the 4 horns. Okay, so I've always seen those two, the third beast of Daniel and the second ram, as the same beast, just told in a different way. But Leroy has the perspective that the ram and the goat are like, just they don't really matter. The 4 horns are actually the 4 beasts. So there's a lot of just, we don't know, and we're digging through it. You know what I mean? I believe my perspective is better. He believes his perspective is better. We just have to trust the Lord and see what's going to happen. Yep. But the one thing I can tell you is everything starts in Iran. Okay, we know that. Me and Jericho, myself.
You and Jericho.
Me and Leroy can attest to that. Obviously,
I agree with that.
as well.
Yeah.
Right. So, whatever's going to take place, it's all going to start with Iran. Okay. We got one last question, guys, and then we're out for tonight. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed this live stream. Appreciate you guys being here. So far, I haven't seen a question that's like really good. Somebody ask a question down below. Put a Q by it. What's like a really deep question you guys want answered about Bible prophecy? What's going on with Gaza? I answered this one last night, so check out my stream last night. When do I think the time of Jacob's trouble begins? We answered that last night. Okay.
You were live last night?
Or so sorry. A couple days ago.
I was like,
Yeah,
what?
last
Why
time,
I
last
missed
time.
it? I was like, I missed
Yeah.
it, bro.
To those of you guys who like you watch my streams, you're like, man, this guy's distracted. I'm like doing so many things at once. Like I'm trying to get these questions up, move the screen, so just bear with me. It's funny, she's like spamming it now. So, okay, so now she wants me to say it. Okay, we're not going to count this question then. When do I think the time of Jacob's trouble begins? I still think we have some time, guys. I still think we have some time. This is not it, right? The stage for Jacob's trouble is the total full-scale invasion of Jerusalem by the surrounding nations.
Yep.
This is not it. Gaza is like a little child to Israel, right? They're going to, and for lack of a better term for what's going on, they're going to utterly destroy Gaza, right?
You're
So
going
this
to know.
isn't- Yeah, you're going to know. And that's why Jesus says, don't worry about all these wars and rumors of wars. He's saying, don't worry about them. These are just birth pangs. But when you see the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place, let the reader understand that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
Okay, Farzan
Oh.
says, Jericho, I need your help. So what do you got, Farzan? Somebody put a banger question in the chat.
Just like one of those questions, it's like gonna just like.
I was going to say to the last point, just focus on the times and the seasons. Focus on,
Yeah.
like when Daniel says, when you see this, that's what you should be expecting. When you see the abomination that causes desolation, 3.5 years, all that stuff, times and seasons is what we should be focusing on, and not the actual specific time,
Right.
Yeah.
And that we definitely
Nobody have a
like a
question,
difference.
bro?
That we have
Okay,
a
cool then.
difference.
So, okay, yo, this is a really, really good question, and this is one that I've been waiting for. This guy's saying, look, is there something in prophecy that relates to the Palestinian thing right now? So, like, what's happening right now? Is there something, we could prophesy about where all the Islamic nations will actually join Palestine to support with military force against Israel? So what they're saying is right now, we're in day 9. Is there anything in prophecy that says the Islamic nations will come to Palestine's aid and kick off the tribulation? That's a good question. What are your thoughts?
I don't think there's anything specific about like Palestine, right? The only thing that comes to mind is the Psalms 83 war, right? That's the only thing that comes to my mind when that happens. Now, Jericho, I did mean to tell you, and I don't know if you're going to agree with this or not. I'm not sure if I do either. But someone mentioned that the 6-day war was the Psalm 83 war. I'm not entirely sure. Someone mentioned it. Something I got to look into. But the only thing that I see that Palestine, the Islamic nations coming together is Psalms 83. Anybody else have anything that I might have missed? Bible's a big book, man.
Quick thing about the Psalm 83 war, and we'll get to Leroy because I know you have a lot, is that, the Psalm 83 war, I believe, is connected to Gog and Magog, the Ezekiel 38 war.
Right.
So when you connect that Psalm 83 war and you see Persia, Cush, Put, Meshach, Tubal,
right,
the Ishmaelites, the Hagarites, all forming a
right,
coalition to do what? Wipe out Israel.
Right.
And then what happens in accordance to Gog being destroyed? It's the fact that, the Lord's name is no longer taken in vain anymore within Israel.
Right.
It's the fact that his face will physically be present in
Right.
Jerusalem. It's clearly talking about the return of Yahweh, Jesus
Right.
Christ. So I don't think you can disconnect that from that singular event of the destruction of the Antichrist with
right.
the Psalm 83 war. But that's just my opinion on what you said. Leroy, what are your thoughts?
No, I agree. I believe Psalms 83 definitely is linked to Gog of Magog, Ezekiel 38, 39. What I also believe is that when the Bible does mention, this war that's going to take place in which, Israel would be, 2/3 would be cut off, according to Zechariah 13, the
Right.
Bible focusing on when these nations are actually victorious for a time, right? 3.5 years. The Bible is very clear. They'll trample the city down 3.5 years, times and half a time, 42 months. They will do this.
Yeah.
So the Bible hits on that point when they will actually do this. This war, we don't see in prophecy, which means more than likely Israel is going to be triumphant over this war. But the one that the Bible does mention is very clear. There's a lot of nations that would, be involved in this, and they'll attack Israel all at once. And also a wounded head is going to make a re-emergence, which I believe is Assyria. Assyria is mentioned in Ezekiel, Psalms 83. It's mentioned in Isaiah 10 as, God's tool of chastisement. But
Right.
he's going to ultimately punish Assyria after. We see this in Micah 5, that Christ is the one who would save Israel from the Assyrian. So there's a lot that's going to take place before we can actually say this is looking like it's going to be it. At the moment, what's going on in Israel, it's not mentioned prophetically, which more than likely seems like it's not of significance, like in relation to the end time. So,
I mean,
I'll finish up. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say one thing real quick. This is just like the beginning, right? World War II took like 10 years to actually build up to get where it was. World War II was like 10 years. World War I started in the 1890s, right? That's when it really began to build, right? And then right after World War I, World War II built up, right? It was the same with the Civil War and with, the Revolutionary War. Things take time to build up. So this could be the very beginning. When we look back in history, this could be, this is the beginning.
Yeah, so for me and for Leroy, I speak for Leroy as well, because we believe that Daniel is the ultimate, Daniel 11 and Daniel 8, and especially Daniel 7 is the ultimate timeline we're supposed to get, because Jesus mentions the abomination of desolation as the singular event. So the abomination of desolation is all the way at the bottom of Daniel 11:35. And so a lot of modern day Christian evangelicals will say, well, look, Daniel 11 starts with the kings of, Iran and Medo-Persia butting out against Alexander the Great. And while there is that application, within Daniel 10, it says that this prophecy is in reference to the time of the end, to the latter end of the indignation, right? Towards the end of days. So if Daniel 11 is fully future, then we know exactly what's going to happen in the beginning. Okay. Yeah. And many prophecy teachers are actually starting to understand this. So if that is the case, we are looking for Iran to stir up everyone to fight against the king of Iran, which is the king of Turkey, followed by a Turkish response. That's what we're looking for. So I don't think we need to look for anything else outside of, Gaza might be, you could technically say, well, guess what? Look, Iran is going to stir up everyone, but why would they go attack Turkey? It doesn't make sense, right? It says that the last king of Iran is going to gain riches. He's going to be richer than the rest. And when he has gained by his riches, then he will stir up everyone against the king of Greece. So we're waiting for that. Essentially, that's what we're waiting for.
Right.
And I think these talks of Iran gaining a nuke, that's going to play a major role. That could be a part of the riches that he gains and the power he feels. He feels now he has legitimacy to start the caliphate, and he's going to rush out. That's the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
Right.
So, anyway, guys, that is it for tonight. I appreciate you guys for being on. This was fun having both of you guys. We're going to do more updates like this in the future, okay? If you guys want to support this work, go ahead and go to Patreon, okay? Other than that, any last words?
No, thank you for having me on. And y'all can follow me on Ashton Murray Ministries on my YouTube channel as well, that Jericho has blessed me with, and I appreciate that.
Awesome.
I mean,
Yeah. Thanks for
God's the
having
one
me
that
on
blesses,
again.
man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on again. It's always a pleasure, like, being on and delving into the prophecies. Yeah, love it.
All right, love you guys. All right, let's get out of here. Peace out.